So if I was to reframe it all and say, like, if I had one piece of wisdom, it'd be like, find a good therapist. I've had birthday parties where I invited people with an end time for the party. The best speech has a really good introduction, a really good conclusion, and as little as possible in between.
Welcome to P&P, the Partners in Positivity podcast, where
Aisling Burnett
and myself, Sarah Harty, warriors of EBP, SPP, DHBs, that's emotionally bulletproof, spiritually bulletproof, divine human beings, aim to wake up and shake up the nation through positivity, humor, and shared wisdom.
Before we get stuck into another awesome episode, we just want to let you know that we have a donation page if you wish to support the podcast and help us to continue providing more amazing episodes for you. If you want to Google Partners in Positivity, you'll find our Buzzsprout site, and on there you can find a support button. You can click on that and support to your heart's content, whether it's a one-time donation or a monthly subscription. We really appreciate all the donations that we get. Thanks so much. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with my very first mentor in public speaking, Paul J Corcoran. If you haven't listened, last week we released an episode where we chatted about public speaking and positive practices with Paul, and today we're going to complete the 2-part series with him where we chat about what it's like to be a celebrant and a druid, and he shares some great life wisdom with us too. Enjoy. Paul, I also want to congratulate you for progressing from Toastmasters to starting your own business and becoming a celebrant. How exciting is that? I seen some of the great feedback on your website from people that attended your ceremonies or you created them for. And it reminds me actually of how important love is, celebrating love, rituals, because a friend of mine a couple of years ago asked me to attend her wedding, and I remember not being sure about whether to go or not, maybe because of finance or time, and she wasn't a family member. Maybe I had other weddings that year, but I remember sitting with myself and thinking, what a glorious day to celebrate with someone, shared love and the beautiful atmosphere. So I feel like weddings are super important, and I know that you're delivering such unique ceremonies that are super special. How is that all going?
It's going great. A couple of years ago, I did 1 or 2 weddings too many, and I felt overworked by it. So I made a decision that I was only going to do maybe 5 or 6 weddings a year. And that's now worked out really nicely. So I have, usually a few in the spring and a few in the autumn, maybe one summer one. And the weddings that I only had 1 last year, and I've had a few this year so far. So they've been different because of numbers restrictions, but the ceremonies themselves have felt no less special or magical, and maybe even more so because the people chose to, have their ceremony at a time that was less than ideal, that they weren't able to have the party they wanted or everybody who could be there. I am going to ask you I'm really curious, this is you, but what do you mean when you said that you made a choice to go to the wedding?
Yeah, I received the invite to go to the wedding, and it was a beautiful girl that I lived with called Stephanie. She's American and marrying a lovely Irish man. And yeah, I think it was just time and money, how much weddings cost in Ireland. And I might have had a lot on at the time. And yeah, I just made a conscious choice then about how much I loved her and how important it was to celebrate that part of her life. And that was it, really.
I am not a party person. And there's a whole conversation around my acceptance of that, which took many years. And so my favorite part of weddings is the ceremony and then the meal, and a little bit after, maybe just up to about an hour after the meal. And once it gets to that point, I really just want to go home. So like when we got married 2 years ago, and what was lovely about our wedding was that one of the many lovely things about our wedding, but we had the venue that we hired had an end time for music and dancing and so on as 1 a.m. So we had, our guests knew that, you know, the wedding was going to end at that time, and most people were staying in nearby B&Bs. There was only a limited number of rooms in the venue itself, which was all for family. So the buses that we had hired to collect guests all arrived around 12:30. So everybody just left at the same time. So there was no sense that the party was dragging on, or you had to mind people, or people got too drunk. It was a nicely timed. We had a great evening of dancing, and then suddenly it stopped and everybody went home, which for me was perfect, because that's my idea of, you know, life. I've had birthday parties where I invited people with an end time for the party.
I love how clear you are on your boundaries, Paul. You've always been that way.
I know that might sound funny, but I've got friends who only came because they knew there was an end time, and that it was contained, because it, like, I'm very introverted, and I know from experience over the last 4 decades of my life what's the tipping point for me in terms of where I enjoy and don't enjoy. So containment for me is really important, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why I love ceremony so much, and also why I love Toastmasters and events like that, is that it's a contained event that has a start time and an end time, and there isn't a sense of energy dissipating because there's no containment. So for me, the container is as important as what happens within it. So yeah, so then with and I say this to couples a lot with weddings, is that, you know, how we begin and how we end is as important as all the words that you say at the ending. So we need to put as much time and effort into thinking about how you are going to arrive into the space, and what the space is going to be before you arrive, and how you are going to leave from that space, because those two parts tell a huge amount of the story of your wedding. That, you know, how, so for our wedding, we chose to arrive at the same time and from opposite sides of the same room. So like there was no sense of like one at the other. And we also arrived, we accompanied our mothers in, like our mothers didn't accompany us, we accompanied our mothers in, and we have an equal number of nieces and nephews, about the same age, so it was nice balance. So we accompanied our mothers in and our nieces and nephews. And all our guests were already there. But there's a myriad of other ways that you can do that, but each one tells the story about what it means to you as a couple. So like the last wedding I did was a lesbian couple who already have a couple of kids. So it would be bizarre for them to arrive separately, because their story isn't about them arriving separately. It's that they are already a family unit. So they arrived together as a family unit and came in, and we had our ceremony, and then they left together as that same family unit, because having performed the ceremony and now leaving as a married couple. But that entry and exit is an enormous part of the story. It's just like with a speech, and I think this is one my dad uses all the time, is like, you know, the best speech has a really good introduction, a really good conclusion, and as little as possible in between.
Another fascinating part of your life that I'd love to talk about, Paul, is that you are a Druid. You're a member of a Druid order. Could you give us, or give the listeners, an understanding about what it's like to be a Druid, and what part does that play in your life?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sarah. I'm a member of an organization called the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids, which people just refer to as OBOD, OBOD. And I can't actually contain the part of that in my life. It's foundational in many ways. So I've been a member of that order since I was for 21 years. So half my life, my entire adult life. And the reason why I joined is that when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was looking for some way to explore my spirituality that didn't come heavy with dogma, that didn't have like, here's a belief system that you need to buy into, or that felt expansive, and that had expansive in all directions, down, you know, and around, up. And I found that through this Druid order, which has a training program, which is really a personal and spiritual development program. So there's a series of booklets over the course of a year that you have, you know, writing exercises and ceremonies and stuff to do. And for me, it allows me to connect firstly with myself and the world in which I sit. So I'm not very good at dressing up as a druid. So I have some of the things that you would associate, like I have a cloak and I have robes and so on, but I use them for ceremony when everybody else is the same, because it allows us to connect in and feel like we're doing something very special. Not feel like, but acknowledge that we're doing something very special, and transition into that space through clothing. But away from that aspect of it, for me, it's very hard to describe because it's not a single thing. There's no core belief, but it's more around association. So I place a lot of value in my connection to the land where I stand, and that not from a sense of ownership, but just a sense of this land is important and valuable. And I don't mean valuable monetarily. I mean, it's something that I put value on. So I want to get to know a deeper sense of the history and the ecology and how our ancestors lived in this space, and the remnants of them here and so on. And I'm aware that I am not giving you a clear answer. So for instance, let me give you an example. So as you may have gathered, I like to, host ceremonies and organize things. So when we moved here, I connected with some of my friends who I'd already met with several times for ceremonies in the past with different groups and so on, and just started a group here. So it's within this organization, we call our groups seed groups, because the idea of like planting a seed for a grove in the forest. So we named our seed group on Awenvour, so which is the Irish name for the Blackwater River, which runs through North Cork. So it's the North Cork Seed Group. But and the sense of the Blackwater is because in some way here in this geographic area, which is a very distinct area, North Cork. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the dynamics of Cork County, but North Cork is a very distinct identity within County Cork. But North Cork is defined by the Blackwater River and all the towns that are on it and are on tributary rivers. So our local seed group then is all those of us who are in the same Druid order who are living in this region. And we're meeting up next week for our second in-person ceremony, and we're going to go for a picnic in a local park, and we're going to have a ceremony for the summer solstice, and afterwards we'll share some stories and songs and so on. The order itself is, I suppose, it is also a community, and there's tens of thousands of members, and they can be quite dissociated from each other, but we're connected through a sense of commonality through our ceremony structure, which is very dogma free, but also is quite prescriptive in some of the words that are used. But that gives us a container. This is the thing that we do, and it gives us a focal point. And our focus as well is a lot on promoting creativity and peace. So peace within, peace without, and wellness and well-being, but also creative expression. And the primary focus of our kind of spiritual practices is around connecting with the source of inspiration, which might be God for you, or goddess, or the land around you, or your heritage, or whatever, but it's the source of inspiration, and allowing yourself to receive that inspiration and to create something from it, either to write a story, or create a website, or sing a song, whatever way your creative expression shows itself from that. And that's the stuff that we do. It's a huge part of my life. I also serve as a mentor. So I completed the Order's training program a few years ago, and I applied then to be a mentor for new members. So I have around about 30 people who I've emailed, or they've emailed me, and people will write at some point during their journey to say, check in how they're going, and to see what their if there's any feedback I can give or any questions I can answer.
That's magic. Thanks for explaining that. And I'm curious to know, how do you celebrate rituals, create them, or even something like the summer solstice? Myself and Ash got up every morning for a week and celebrated the sunrise, did a bit of stretching, listened to some positive affirmations, and we recognize the absolute value of the sun in the cosmos. But yeah, what do you guys do for that?
There's a few different ways you can do things. If you're in an area where there's a sense of something deep in the landscape where the solstice has been celebrated, either you're like a hilltop that's associated with something, or a stone circle where there's an alignment, that adds a sense of being in communion with your ancestors or the people of the land before you, that you are doing something that they also did in some way. That's not essential, but it adds a sense of another layer of depth and connection. What we'll be doing next week is using the ceremony script that's provided by the order. And one of the things I really like about this summer solstice ceremony is that it acknowledges that we're at the time of highest light, and there's a sense of great energy in the world, but also that we're almost on a hilltop in the landscape, the mythological landscape, and from here we can view all the directions. So the ceremony itself actually focuses on acknowledging and welcoming in all 4 seasons and all the times of the year. So there's a point at which you're facing east and acknowledging the spring and sunrise, and facing north and acknowledging the midwinter solstice and the depths of winter, which is a nice way to bring everything together into one sense of union at this point of the solstice. And another part of the ceremony as well is people are invited to make like an oak crown, so a crown of oak leaves, one for the ceremony itself. And this is tapping into like modern mythology that emerged out of the 19th century. There's loads of stuff around it. This isn't something ancient. This is a modern pagan practice. And to embody the oak king, so the crowned solar being that you can be at this time of highest light, and people are invited to put the crown on and then say something that they want about the world, where they want their people's prayers to go, or a declaration of something that they're going to do for the year ahead. Little things like that.
That's so interesting. And actually it brings me back to 3 years ago. And we also went back 2 years ago. My cousin Carl organised it. He absolutely loves Ireland, loves the land and hiking and everything. And Avril came with us too, and another friend of his. We went up to Lough Crew in County Meath for the autumn equinox. It was such an interesting morning, and as we were on our way up, we did see people wearing cloaks. And when we were on the hilltop, there was a small group of people facing the sun, singing and playing barons. So now I know a bit more about what they were actually doing. Thanks so much for explaining that to us.
Yeah, I've never been to Lough Crew, but it's quite a well-known spot in the Irish pagan community. There's a few people who host ceremony there all year round and act as guardians of the place. They'll host ceremony there and host other people's ceremonies.
Yeah, there was a really lovely atmosphere, and there's a little bungalow cafe when you come down, and we had a cup of tea and a bowl of porridge to heat us back up because it was quite cold up there that morning. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and the people were so lovely. You can tell it's really well looked after.
Yeah, ceremony is powerful, and there's, I suppose, different intentions that you can come to it with. Just like I was saying about, how do you arrive at a ceremony? If your wedding ceremony, how do you leave? There's a different story as well than how do you arrive at, a ceremony for some point in the wheel of the year. So for many people then who are going to sites like Lough Crew and other ancient sites within the Irish landscape, there is a sense in which we're connecting with a deeper sense of our history and heritage, and it expands the story and the narrative into tens of thousands of years as opposed to hundreds of years, in which we have a smaller sense of who we are as a people. And if you connect with something physically in the land like an ancient site like Lough Crew, we expand our story to be that we are, the inheritors of the landscape, but also we walk it just in the same way that our ancestors, 5,000 years ago did, and that we are that we are in direct communion with something that connects us with them.
Yeah.
But the big thing is that sense of expanding the story and expanding our sense of identity.
Yeah, and I think it gives you more of an appreciation of where you've come from and what they went through and our connection. Yeah.
And then on a minute scale, there's who am I at this, like, how am I physically, and how is my life at this point in the year, at this point of autumn equinox, how do I feel about approaching the darkness of winter? The autumn equinox is historically a time for taking stock. It's around the festival of Michaelmas, and it's when our ancestors in medieval Europe would have collected tithes and seen what the harvest was since the summer. So what did we sow in the spring that we're now harvesting in the autumn, and what do we have in our lives, and how are we moving forward then into the dark half of the year for another 6 months before we plant seeds again.
Yeah.
And so how am I in my life right now? So there's that micro story of how am I in this year, how am I in my life, and how do I connect with my broader community and the landscape in general.
Yeah, and I love listening to my cousin Carl when we're on these little trips together, and he brings me back to years ago, and he talks about, when it's autumn equinox at Loch Crew, when the sun comes up and it shines into the tomb, is it?
I've heard people call it the chamber, and they have numbers, but I don't know which ones they're referring to.
The chamber, yeah. So he's saying, can you imagine years ago when we didn't have the technology that we have today, and they were able to construct this place so perfectly that on that very day of the year where the sunrise would shine through and light up the chamber, it's just so fascinating, even with new ground and everything.
And that gives us then a sense of awe and wonder. And we're talking about positivity. How do we approach the world from a sense of awe? And so we have a sense of awe then about the capabilities of our ancestors, and they had a sense of awe about the fact that the sun was rising and the sun and how things moved. But it also reminds us to view the sun and sunrise and our place in the cosmos with a sense of awe, because we can get lost in those stories of the world and be our busy mind. And it's important to remember, actually, we're part of a much bigger story of the cosmos. And as soon as you look at that, you can't have anything but awe.
That's brilliant. I feel like with that kind of planning, you're setting a really good intention, and that's just so powerful. So, Paul, if you have one piece of wisdom to share from your whole life, what would it be?
One piece of wisdom from my whole life. You see, now I want to know who is the wisdom for. Like, who am I talking to? Am I talking to a younger version of me? Am I talking to another adult in the room? So at work yesterday, we had a meeting, and one of my colleagues asked everybody as an icebreaker to bring their favorite quote. So my favorite quote, I don't know if it's my favorite quote ever, but it's one that I like to revisit, is the one from Byron Katie about how life is simple, everything happens for you, not to you. And it concludes then with you don't have to like it, but it's easier if you do. And I've missed out a few sentences in the middle, but that sense of approaching life from a position of opportunity and support, that the world is supporting you, or the world is providing opportunities rather than the world is providing barriers and restrictions, even though both may be the same thing, but it's just a way of viewing them. I have lots of things that I could say to different people or me at different ages. And like, if I was to say something to myself, say 10 years ago, because I think I've done a huge amount of growth in the last 10 years, it would be to value my own needs first. Because like 10 years ago, I was in a not very healthy relationship, and lots of weird codependent habits and so on. So actually, what I would tell myself at that age is find a really good therapist, because I found that really good therapist after I ended that relationship. And I spent a year with a therapist, which was an amazing experience. And I would really love to do that again, like have a period of really focused personal growth with someone who is an expert in their field and who is there to support you in your unfolding personal growth. So if I was to reframe it all and say, like, if I had one piece of wisdom, it'd be like, find a good therapist.
That's actually brilliant.
Brilliant. And I remember being so grateful for you and your open-mindedness and your ability to be able to express yourself when we worked with each other in the restaurant, because I love the days where you used to come in after a therapy session and explain to us what happened and how you felt afterwards. And therapists are just so important and so vital, especially right now. But the thing is to find the right one. So that's a brilliant piece of wisdom, and I'm delighted to know who you were then and to see where you're at now today. And to finish how we started, which was on the subject of Toastmasters, I remember being at a competition as a judge in Northern Ireland, and I remember a lady speaking about wisdom from her grandmother, who said to her, if she's ever having a bad day, to repeat this affirmation: look up, let go, live. Look up, let go, live. And she continues to do that. So thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for your beauty. Thank you for the positive impact that you've had on me. And you really are doing brilliantly and doing great work through the multiple organisations that you are helping out, mentoring people, empowering people. And it was such a pleasure for me to have you on the podcast. You are certainly a link in my golden chain of good, and for us here at Partners in Positivity. We wouldn't be a Positive Vice without you. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and where you are right now in the world.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Aisling.
Thanks a million, Paul. This has been a lovely chat, getting to know you, and very illuminating, I would say. Thanks for all the epic stories you shared with us. They really actually helped me have a deeper understanding and deeper connection, and I think you're a really important teacher in the world. And thanks for everything you've done for Sarah. I know she has huge admiration for you with all the help that you've given to her and all the lives that you've touched in Toastmasters. Well done, and keep going.
Gas crack.
Congratulations, well done. Pat yourself on the back. You're officially now a partner in positivity with us. If this is your first episode, we're so grateful. If this is your 40th episode, we're equally as grateful for your ears, for your heart, for taking this time out for yourself and committing to your own positive mental health journey. Our intention for this podcast is for you to feel a little bit better afterwards. So we hope you take some time now to check in with yourself. How did you feel before? How do you feel now? And we've definitely done our job if you feel a little bit better, and especially if you want to come back for more next week. If you do want to support us, we actually have a Ko-fi donation page. It's ko-fi.com/partners in positivity. We really value the work that we're doing. We know there's so much positive and negative in the world, and we want to contribute to people feeling their best. So we appreciate all of the donations we've had so far and welcome any more that are on the way. Thank you in advance. Also, if you got something of value from this and you want to share with friends or family to add to this trend of positivity in the world, we would love to be tagged in any posts on social media. You know where to find us. Other than that, guys, have an incredible week ahead, and we look forward to feeding you some more nourishment for that beautiful mind, that beautiful garden of yours next week.